Assemblywoman, thank you so much for joining us today. The Democrats really seem to be at odds over their fast-track legislation to restrict concealed carry in New Jersey. The Senate last month did an amendment that stripped out language that would prevent all 564 municipalities in New Jersey from setting their own rules. The Assembly, as of right now, hasn't taken action on that. Why is that such an important issue on this bill?
Well, that would be an example of a common sense amendment to this bill, which kind of lacks any common sense when taken as a whole. To have a bill in which we are restricting a constitutional right at a statewide level, but then giving the municipalities even more power to do it in any way without any restrictions, that's a problem. And therefore, by giving municipalities an ability to come up with their own rules, every time you pass a border, you might be okay in one town, but then you go to the next town, your concealed carry rights might be different, and therefore you might be in violation of this law.
And those charges are significant, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, what is the penalty if you violate elements of this law?
There are some penalties that are third and second degree offenses. Some are just disorderly persons, but then the next time, if there's another inadvertent violation, it escalates to a second degree crime or a third degree crime, and those are significant, and then you lose the ability to exercise that constitutional right. And I think if I sit back and look at what happened this week in committee, I reflect on what's happened over the last few committee meetings, it appears to me the main goal by the Democratic caucus in enacting or trying to enact this law is to really greatly infringe upon anyone's right to conceal carry in this state. There have been comments made by some of the Assembly people in favor of this law that we need to get more guns off the street, and they're doing so by this law, which makes no sense because it's not addressing the illegal guns that are on the street. We all agree we want to get rid of the illegal guns off the street. This law does nothing to do it. This law restricts legal gun owners' rights.
The Assembly had a whole slew of amendments that they passed this week. Did any of them really fix any of the constitutional problems with the bill?
No. There's been no attempt, and as far as I'm concerned, to make this law any more constitutional. And it's a shame, really, because we did get some type of direction from the New York court system as to what might be constitutional. But instead, we've still defined the entire state of New Jersey as a sensitive place, except for your home, thankfully, and maybe a shooting range. Mm-hmm. Those are the two places where you can conceal carry. Everywhere else is pretty much off limits.
One of the other amendments that they did is they exempted federal and local prosecutors from this bill. That almost seems to be an admission on their part that some people have a need to actually defend themselves.
Yes, I mean, and I don't underestimate the risk that our prosecutors have out there when they go and prosecute criminals. I don't underestimate what the judges are doing. What happened with Judge Salas' son was tragic. You know, I would think we need to make sure that they have their rights exercised, but we've created a special classification for a certain group while ignoring a classification of other groups that might need that right protected and have that right to carry. In committee this week, we had testimony from someone who works with domestic violence people throughout the state, and he did a survey of the people he works with to determine whether or not these women who have been suffered domestic violence and live in fear of their lives, whether or not they would like to exercise their right to conceal carry if they could provide them funding for training, for the permitting costs, for the cost of carrying the gun. And they had over 60% of the people who responded overwhelmingly wished to have that opportunity because they do live in fear of their lives, that the person that was their spouse or was their partner might follow through with a threat to cause harm to their lives. I don't know why a special exemption hasn't been provided for people like that.
And those are the exact people I assume the U.S. Supreme Court was thinking when they wrote the Bruin decision and said people have a right to protect themselves, right?
And a lot of people talked about how that decision gave people, and it's particularly women, it empowered them to find this way in which they could protect themselves in a world in which they don't feel so safe. And right now, public safety is number one. I mean, I think no matter what happened in this election, the big issue that came out of this election that's concerning Americans, New Jerseyans, is safety. Everyone is really worried about the rise in crime. I think everyone is altering their lifestyles because of the crime, for instance, in our cities, in New York City for one. And that's why we need to make sure people feel safe so that they can continue to engage in life outside of their home.
just a little bit of the timeline here and what you expect is going to happen going forward. The Assembly's voting session next is on December 15th.
Yes.
And the Senate is meeting on December 22nd. A lot of people presume that the Democrats want to put up the bill for a vote in those. What is going to happen between now and then, do you think?
I'm hoping that there'll be more amendments, because no matter what, if you're for this legislation, for stricter rules when it comes to concealed carry after Bruin, or you're against making it more stricter, no matter what, you're all going to find out that this law is going to be deemed unconstitutional. I think it's pretty clear. I think a first-year law student, I'm sure this is going to be one of those questions that might find itself on a constitutional law exam or maybe a bar exam. So I think all those law students out there should be practicing. This law would be subject to challenge. This law will be deemed unconstitutional in some way, shape, or form. Just north of us in New York, it's already been deemed unconstitutional in so many ways because it's such overreach. And this law goes way beyond what New York did.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much, Assemblywoman.
Thank you.